Good evening. 406 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Billboard Chris will be with us at 4:30. We'll talk to him about an important congressional hearing today on the destruction of the American child, the gender insanity going on, and hopefully the way out of that. And then Mike McCormick will be with us. He is a former stenographer for then Vice President Joe Biden. He had a front row seat to so much of the chaos that we're now discussing in America. We'll chat with him about yesterday's big events and today's for that matter. And we'll have you join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joining us right now is Congressman Pat Fallon. He represents Texas's 4th Congressional District. He's also a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us. Check, check, 1, 2. Is the congressman with us? I think he's there. I could hear the sound.
Vince, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are, Congressman. Good to have you with us, sir. Thank you.
Hey, you are a great American. Sorry for the technical hiccup.
That's all right. God bless. All right, so what do you make of this Hunter Biden plea deal falling apart yesterday and the judge doing her job of asking some questions and realizing that it looked like the Justice Department and Hunter Biden's team were trying to pull a fast one on the judicial system?
No, there's no doubt about it, Vince. And I think, listen, as I said many times, I'm not out to get the Bidens, and I don't, that German word for people that take joy in others' misery, I'm not out for that. But we've got to pursue justice. And when you have someone that has not paid their fair share of taxes, not at all, right? On $8.5 million of income, and they're going to walk away with probation. That is clearly a sweetheart deal of really a prince of power. And it abhorred me, and I don't give a rat's nuggets whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. We have to have justice has to be blind. It wasn't in this case, and it just might end up being so. At the end of the day, so I think it was a very good thing.
Right, but yesterday they were trying to slam through a plea deal that was going to give Hunter Biden blanket immunity from any prosecution on any of his family's business dealings going forward. The judge sniffed this out and said, I'm not going to accept this. You're going to have to come back with something different. That sounds to me like they're trying to defraud the court, Congressman. This is a pretty, I think, a consequential case.
There's no doubt about it. And also, they wanted her to be an arbiter when, let's just say, there was a different administration with a different Justice Department. And they didn't want the Justice Department to have the authority to pursue, justice. And they wanted Hunter Biden to skirt that, too. So it was really kind of a twofold dipsy-do, if you will.
Right.
And I'm glad she sniffed it out. And I doubt that CNN will say that she was Trump-appointed when she actually did her job and did it well.
Yeah, and by the way, she was recommended by the two Democrat senators from Delaware. That's how she got the job.
Exactly.
So there's a reason, I believe, that the Justice Department wants to keep on insisting that this case continues to be open into Hunter Biden, that the investigation is open, and that's to prevent you, Congressman Pat Fallon, and your colleagues on the Oversight Committee and some of these other committees in Congress from getting access to this information. It looks to me like the Justice Department is trying to obstruct your efforts to be transparent with the public.
Well, they've been doing that at every turn. I mean, just to take case in point, it's like the suspicious activity reports, which are generated by a financial institution when they think there might be fraud, money laundering, et cetera. Congress has always had access to those, and we call them SARS, is the acronym, until there were 170 of them generated because of Biden family activity. And suddenly the Treasury didn't want us to give us access to those. And they finally did, only when we had the majority and only when we had the subpoena power that came with that majority. That's one of several examples.
Yeah, and so they keep getting in your way. Do you think an impeachment inquiry would give you the additional powers necessary to get to the bottom of all of this?
I think it's very important that we do open an impeachment inquiry because if we look at this in historical context, because many people say to me, Pat, you think everything's ever going to come in this and we move on? And I say to them, well, Watergate, the break-in happened in the middle of 1972, and Nixon didn't resign until August of 74, so it was almost 2.5 years. We've been at this for 6 months, and we have found way more I mean, now I remember talking to you about a month ago when I had read the 1023. Well, now everybody can read the 1023, and I encourage them to do so. In fact, you're going to read a little bit more than I did originally because none of it's redacted. And you can see this naked corruption. It fits in place. Every bit of information we found and evidence that we've uncovered in the last 6 months corroborates the other stuff we'd already known or had discovered prior. All of it. So there's no way. Is it more likely than not that crimes have been committed? 100% more likely than not. Absolutely, no doubt.
That FD 1023 form, I know you characterized it and my jaw dropped. And then I read it and then my jaw dropped. It is unbelievable what's alleged about the current president of the United States. In that form, you have a trusted FBI source, a man who's had apparently a ton of credibility for having given good information in the past to the FBI, paid through the years by our government for the value of that information, saying that we're looking at $5 million each to Hunter and Joe Biden, paid in the form of a bribe by the head of Burisma in order to get Viktor Shokin, the top prosecutor in Ukraine, fired. And that Viktor Shokin has, as you mentioned at the time, 17 audio recordings, 15 of which are with Hunter Biden, 2 are with Joe Biden, talking about this very thing. What's coming next in that particular case? Are we ever going to find out, say, the identity of the person who has all of this important information?
Yeah, well, what's going to happen, the very next thing is Devin Archer is coming in, and he was Hunter Biden's not only business partner, but former best friend. So this is what we know, and this is why it's in relation to what you just mentioned with the 1023. We know that Viktor Shokin started an inquiry on Burisma in February of 2015. That's a fact, okay? Nobody's disputing that. And then in September of 2015, the U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt gave a speech in Odessa, Ukraine, about corruption because it's rampant in that country, and specifically by name mentioned Zlochevsky, the head of Burisma. Then we have December 9th in 2015, or just before December 9th, we had Hunter Biden over there in Dubai with none other than Zlochevsky and a couple of other head honchos at Burisma because he was on the board being paid somewhere between $50,000 and $83,000 per month. Zlochevsky asks him, will you call your dad? He calls his father. His father doesn't say anything specifically about the business deals, but then Hunter says to him, Dad, they need our help. They need our support. So the message from the bagman was loud and clear. So what did Joe Biden do? A couple of days later, he flies to Ukraine, gives a speech about the poison of cronyism, corruption, kleptocracy, and all that, and then insist that they fire Shokin, who's investigating the company his son sits on the board of, and allegedly was given $5 million to Hunter and himself. And then in March, he gets fired, and they withheld $1 billion worth of aid, and then they released the aid. To this day, Vince, Burisma has never been investigated again. And Shokin was doing his job vis-a-vis Zlochevsky because he seized 4 of his homes, 2 plots of land, a Rolls Royce, and then they called the dogs off. You tell me why.
Right, and there is audio of Joe Biden, phone call audio of Joe Biden speaking to the old president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, and Poroshenko saying, Viktor Shokin's not guilty of anything. He's not even accused of being guilty of anything, but you asked us to fire him, and we fired him. So that seems like a big deal, and all of that evidence exists. So Devin Archer, Hunter Biden's business partner, is coming to speak to you and your committee, the Oversight Committee, on Monday. It is reported that he's expected to share at least 24 occasions that Joe Biden called into some of these meetings with Hunter Biden and his foreign business partners. But I've also heard that Devin Archer may suggest that Joe Biden didn't know what he was calling into. He was just answering the phone when his son called like a good father. What are you expecting from Devin Archer?
It's going to be interesting. I think we're going to hear some of that, but hopefully we get the truth because that's what we're out for. I don't want him to say what he thinks we want to hear. I want him to talk to us about what really happened. Okay.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden said in 2019, and Vince, he could have been just very honest and said, well, yeah, of course my son's in business with this, and I wish him the best, but I wasn't involved in this stuff. I might have met his friends and whatever. I don't know what the hell he was doing.
Right.
Well, that's one thing. But he said he built this firewall that said, I have no idea what he was doing. I've never specifically discussed any business with him. We know that not to be true. It doesn't make any sense that the vice president of the United States, given plenipotentiary powers by the president vis-a-vis Ukraine, to get so interested in one particular company and that his son happened to sit on the board of if it wasn't coordinated. It makes no sense whatsoever that Shokin was getting to Zlochevsky, and Zlochevsky's biggest problem was Shokin. And Joe Biden got rid of him for him.
Yes.
We really need to narrow and focus on this. And Archer was at the seat of the table there. And he did say, because Joe Biden, listen, they're smart enough not to be that stupid, right? That Joe Biden is going to say, hey, don't worry about it, Zlochevsky, Nicola, I'll take care of that for you. He's saying it through his son.
Yes.
His son's the bag man. His son has always been the bag man for the last 10 years.
Well, this is what Tony Bobulinski said when he came out in public in 2020. He said that he was constantly advised that they needed to keep Joe Biden's name only spoken, not in writing, because they were very paranoid. Jim and Hunter Biden, very paranoid that Joe Biden's name would appear in any piece of writing associated with their business dealings.
So let's talk about the big guy, because when I was on the call with you after I read the 1023,
yes,
see, Tony Bobulinski said he referred Joe Biden was the big guy. We now also know that investigators from the IRS and FBI were not allowed to pursue questions about the big guy or who Dad was. We all know who Dad and the big guy were. So that's Tony Bobulinski. He didn't know Zlochevsky over in Ukraine, but Zlochevsky, according to the 1023, referred to Joe Biden as none other than what? The big guy. And 5 years later, an American that he has never met says, oh, we used to call Joe Biden the big guy. That's awfully coincidental, isn't it?
It is coincidental. Well, it's not a coincidence, actually. But your point's well taken. Everyone seems to know who the big guy is. And Tony Bobulinski, of course, said 1,000% that is Joe Biden that we're talking about. Will Bobulinski appear soon? I mean, you've got Devin Archer coming in. Should I expect a Bobulinski appearance in the Oversight Committee?
I think you're going to be very surprised by what unfolds in the months to come, because what I'm getting a sense of the dams breaking. Because once you have one whistleblower, and then you have three, and then you have five, you're going to get more. And once more of these former business associates come forward, and just all we're asking, just tell us the truth.
Yep.
And when you're under oath, you better damn well do it, because then you're in hot water if you don't. And I was struck by my questioning of Ziegler, one of the IRS agents that was a whistleblower, when I asked him about when Hunter Biden shut down one of his shell companies in D.C., and they moved their files to a storage unit in Northern Virginia. And then they asked for, they were preparing a search warrant to go in and raid that storage unit. And they got permission. And then Leslie Wolf, an assistant U.S. attorney, called none other than Hunter Biden's lawyers and tipped them off that raid was coming.
Right.
What, are you kidding me? And I asked them both, Shapley and Ziegler, and for Ziegler, he said that was his red line, where that brought him to that committee that day. He said, at that point, I knew that I had to blow the whistle because something was terribly wrong. They'd never seen that before. And then Shapley being ordered not to initiate contact with Hunter Biden, even though he wanted to talk to him. He was allowed to sit outside of his house, but he couldn't approach him. Now, why can't you approach a subject of an inquiry? That's ridiculous. Yeah. Neither of them had ever seen that in their collected 27 years. So don't tell me, Jamie Raskin, that this was all normal. It wasn't normal. And the frontline prosecutors and the investigators all wanted to bring felony charges against Hunter Biden, but the higher-up political appointees wouldn't allow it. That is not normal.
Congressman Pat Fallon, finally, you mentioned the IRS whistleblowers. I noticed during that hearing they had indicated a couple of times that they would bring additional information to you and your colleagues following the hearing. Has anything interesting come out of that?
Are you talking about the IRS whistleblowers?
Yeah, the IRS whistleblowers. I know that, for instance, in Ziegler's case, he had said that he'd be able to provide more information after the hearing. I think he needed to seek some permission from the Ways and Means Committee to give you additional info.
Yeah, that's forthcoming, and I can't wait to see that as well. And that's why it's very important to coordinate, because they're honestly, I tell you candidly, Vince, I believe right now I could teach a 3-credit college course on just this topic. That's how much information. So it's a bit overwhelming when you have a 3 or 5 minute interview on television
yep.
and on the radio. It's hard to fit it all in because there's so much here. When you get the breadth of it, there's no way a reasonable person, an independent-minded, objective person would come away not thinking that the Bidens are definitely guilty, definitely have met the preponderance of the evidence, and quite possibly reasonable doubt at this point.
Yep. Yeah, they're corrupt, and all of the pieces are coming together. Thanks in no small part to the work you're doing on the Oversight Committee. Congressman Pat Fallon, thank you very much, as always. Good to talk to you today, sir. A bizarre moment this morning as South Carolina Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace got up early and got out the door to go to a prayer breakfast in support of Senator Tim Scott, also from her home state of South Carolina, to support his presidential run. Nancy Mace telling an anecdote about what happened this morning when she woke up and was getting ready. Parental advisory warning, it's a bit racy.
On this together, another year, another standing room only event. And when I woke up this morning at 7, I was getting picked up at 7:45. Patrick, my fiance, tried to pull me by my waist over this morning in bed. And I was like, no, baby, we don't got time for that this morning. I got to get to the prayer breakfast and I got to be on time. And a little TMI, but he can wait. I'll see him later tonight. But I was here.
What is that? Did you hear what I just heard? She said her fiance wanted to engage in a little living in sin hanky-panky. She told the Christian audience at the prayer breakfast today. But she said, he can wait. I'm saving up my sin for later. Although I should point out that is not premarital hanky-panky. She's been married twice and divorced twice, so that's actually postmarital hanky-panky. Not sure where that falls. But there you go. Congresswoman Nancy Mace saying she skipped it this morning in order to support Tim Scott. Would you take that deal? Would you make that trade? Hold tight. Billboard Chris joining us just minutes away. We've got other things to talk about from Congress. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Mike McCormick, former stenographer for then Vice President Joe Biden. He'll join us at 5:30, get his reaction to all of the new revelations about the Biden family business dealings. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A big hearing in the United States Congress today in the House Judiciary Committee as they considered the issue of so-called gender-affirming care for children. That is the mutilation of children at the hands of the medical industry. Here's some sound as Congressman, the chairman, Mike Johnson, played from the beginning of the hearing of a pink-haired queer surgeon who was boasting about the operations he was conducting on children. Here's the sound from that audio.
So 80% or so of my practice is gender-affirming surgery. So I do facial, chest surgery, and genital surgery. But the majority of my practice and sort of where my passion lies is really genital surgery cases. So I do a lot of vaginoplasty and a lot of phalloplasty. I would just say they're expanding in either direction. So yeah, a lot of adolescents presenting for surgical intervention, but also a lot of people that are like in their 70s sometimes coming in for genital surgery, and then everything in between. But the adolescents for sure present some unique challenges. Obviously, there's great evidence supporting pubertal suppression for a whole variety of benefits. But the one thing that is very new is genital surgery in someone that has underwent pubertal suppression. Not so much an issue in someone with assigned female at birth anatomy that undergoes a phalloplasty, because we're creating something with a free tissue transfer, a flap anyway. But a much bigger issue for an individual that's undergoing a penile inversion vaginoplasty, because we use all of that tissue to basically create the vulva as well as line the internal vaginal canal. And as a specialty, those of us that do a fairly high volume of genital gender-affirming surgery, we've maybe done a handful of pubertally suppressed adolescents as a field, and no one's published on it yet. OHSU we're just putting our first series together as we're kind of learning and figuring out what works.
All right. So next time somebody tells you this isn't happening to kids, direct them to that disgraceful recitation of what's happening in our country. Let me bring in Chris Elston. You know him as Billboard Chris on Twitter. He's the father of 2 girls and traveling North America, of course, spreading the message that your body is not a mistake and that this gender-affirming care, what they call that, is very cruel. Chris, good to have you back with us, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Vince. Let me clarify something real quick there for those who couldn't understand that guy. Because they give these kids puberty blockers for these boys, their genitalia never grows, so they're cutting out some of the lining of their abdomen to form the interior wall of this fake vagina that they're creating for these boys, because there's not enough tissue. For these supposedly fully reversible puberty blockers, by the way.
Doesn't sound like there's anything reversible about that.
It's totally insane. But it's good. We're having hearings, finally. Chloe Cole today was up there speaking, did a fantastic job. She's been traveling the country. This is a young girl who was given puberty blockers at the age of 13, along with testosterone, had a double mastectomy at 15, regretted it less than a year later. So she's been doing a fantastic job helping state legislatures formulate legislation to put a stop to this.
Yeah.
And she's now suing as well. So we have a whole bunch of lawsuits coming.
It's critical. Now, she was maimed by this gender industry. And I was struck by the fact that, and disheartened by the fact that the Democrats on the committee today, they took a demonic posture and defended all of this mutilation. I do want to play a moment. Chloe Cole got very emotional speaking about another one of the witnesses, a woman who claims to have a transgender child who she supports going down that road with the gender industry. Here's Chloe Cole reacting to that.
Well, I understood that Mrs. Reynolds is scared for her child. And I just want to set the record straight that I don't hate her. I don't think anybody in this room hates her. In fact, I see my own mother and my own father in her, and that she dearly loves her child. And she's doing the best with what she's been given. And unfortunately, it's not much. And for that, I'm sorry. I mean, I think every parent deserves the utmost grace and guidance with how to help their child. That being said, I don't wish for her child to have the same result as I did. I don't wish for anybody to regret transition or to detransition, because it's incredibly difficult. It comes with its own difficulties, and it's not easy. And I hope that her child gets to have a happy and fulfilling adulthood.
You know, Chris, what do you make of the fact that Democrats invited that woman in to this hearing today? And my guess is they didn't expect that Chloe Cole would be such an effective witness to rebut her claims that it is possible to be born in the wrong body.
Yeah, the adult in the room there is Chloe Cole, who's celebrating her 19th birthday today, testifying before Congress. Ralph Nadler started this whole thing off by saying in his 30 years serving in Congress, he's never been more disgusted that the House Judiciary Committee was taking up this subject, the subject of permanent mutilation and sterilization of children. That's how far gone these Democrats are. But the mother that Chloe was talking to there, the mother had previously given testimony where, because her little girl at the age of 11 didn't like the color pink, liked playing football, and most of her friends were boys, this meant that her daughter was a boy. So are we telling all our girls now that if they don't like pink and they want to throw around the football, that this means that they need to get surgeries and have their puberty blocked? That's all that transgenderism means.
Yes.
It means you don't conform to certain stereotypes. And the message we should be sending the world is that that's fine. You don't have to conform to the stereotypes associated with your sex. You're still a beautiful girl or a beautiful boy.
Yes.
But this mother went on to say how at the age of 11, this is 7 years ago, they moved to Texas, and that they had this very well thought out process where they saw people from different specialties. They saw counselors. They filled out a lot of questionnaires, and it wasn't a rushed process. And you know what? There's some truth in that, because 7 years ago, this wasn't such a rushed process, and this was barely affecting any children 7 years ago. Today, the practice is on their very first appointment, give these kids puberty blockers. Reuters reported that 7 gender clinics they spoke to recently all were giving out puberty blockers on their very first appointment. The trend within this entire industry is no therapy, because to even suggest therapy is needed is to invalidate a child's so-called gender identity. And why would you need to do that? If a child says that, if a girl says she's a boy, we're just supposed to take them at their word, because children know what's best for them.
I did notice, though, that Mrs. Reynolds, who believes she has a transgender child, she did say that she wouldn't let her kid be subjected to surgery. She made that seem like it was too far afield. The puberty blockers are fine, but surgery's too much. That she clearly knows that there's a problem here.
Well, that's right. And I'd say the Democrats made a mistake in calling her as a witness for that purpose, because she stated, yeah, if they had suggested surgery for my child, I would have sought a second or a third opinion, because she knows that's wrong.
Yes.
And the Democrats simultaneously, they know it's wrong, while at the same time they say it's not happening. But if it is happening, it's actually a good thing. So Reuters also reported last year that between the years 2019 and 2021, just through one insurance company they worked with, there were 776 double mastectomies performed on minors. That doesn't include those who paid out of pocket, and it's just those years. So we know for a fact thousands of children have received these surgeries. And then we have that pink-haired queer surgeon at the very beginning from OHSU stating that all sorts of adolescents are coming to him. The numbers are growing, as he laughs about it.
I want to share some other testimony. This is Paula Scanlon. She is a former swimmer for the University of Pennsylvania. She was a teammate with William Thomas, the young man known as Leah Thomas, who broke all those records at the University of Pennsylvania by competing with the women. She revealed today in front of Congress that she was previously sexually assaulted, and that, of course, plays a role in her consideration of a man being in the locker room with her at the same time. Take a listen to this moment.
I know women who have lost roster spots and spots on the podium. I know of women with sexual trauma who are adversely impacted by having biological males in their locker room without their consent. I know this because I am one of these women. I was sexually assaulted on June 3rd of 2016. I was only 16 years old. I was able to forgive my attacker, but violence against women still exists. Let us not forget the viral Me Too movement that empowered female victims to speak up. It casts a spotlight on the widespread prevalence of sexual assault and abuse, including in scholarly and educational institutions. Individuals on this committee have previously stated violence against women is all too common. I am grateful for those members who have brought awareness to the violence against women in the past, but unfortunately, there's still much to be done. As a sexual assault survivor, many policies pushed today completely ignore my experiences and many women like me. I ask the members of this committee, please consider this issue outside the lens of political affiliations and understand the true impact of ignoring the realities of womanhood. Future generations depend on us.
Chris, it seems to me that it takes a lot of courage to not only tell such a vulnerable story, but to be speaking up against such a dominant ideology that's pervading all of these institutions. I mean, how much courage does it take for these witnesses, these young witnesses, to get up there and say all of this?
A ton of courage, because they're young. They have their whole lives ahead of them. I'm a 47-year-old man. People can't really cancel me. They can try, but I don't care what they're going to say. But for her, she has her whole life ahead of her, her careers, and you get blacklisted from a lot of jobs now just for speaking biological reality. She also said in the hearing today that for the women on UPenn's swim team, the women who weren't comfortable in a locker room 10, 15 times a week, changing in front of this naked man, that it wasn't an option for them to have him removed. And if they didn't like it, they could submit to re-education. This is like something out of Mao's China, where it's not that there's a naked man changing around all these women. He's not the problem. It's you and your opinion, so you need to be re-educated about it to get rid of your bigotry.
Democrat Congressman Steve Cohen, in fact, offered a solution to all of this, because even he realizes that there's a difference between men and women. But listen to his harebrained answer.
Transgender people have been around for a long time, and they have rights, and they need to be respected. I read Ms. Scanlon's testimony. I wasn't here to hear it, and I think Penn didn't deal with your situation like they could have and should have in putting up some type of different barriers in the women's area of the locker room. But that's another issue. But things should be dealt with in a different way.
Some barriers may have solved this problem, Chris.
Yeah, you know what would happen? The ACLU would sue. They would say that it was violating Leah Thomas's human rights, that they were discriminating on him on the basis of his gender identity. No, I'm not going to call him a her. But transgender people don't want that. They don't want third spaces. They don't want third categories for sports. They don't want different divisions of prisons to put them in. They want to be considered actual women, these men do, and vice versa. But of course, it's the real women who are at risk, because whether you call yourself a trans woman or you call yourself a man, males commit violence at male rate.
Yes.
That doesn't suddenly change when they call themselves a woman.
How did these Democrat lawmakers and by the way, the world leaders exactly like them all over the planet, but here in the United States, how did all these Democrat lawmakers become experts on so-called gender-affirming care overnight and their most aggressive adherents? How did that happen? Chris? I think Chris is having trouble connecting with us here. One last time. Is Chris there? Nah, it's the thing is collapsing. The answer seems to be the donor class. Something triggered with all these guys that they needed to be the most aggressive defenders of saying that children are born in the wrong bodies, and that the only answer is to put them under the knife and to inject them full of drugs that destroy their ability to procreate. That seems to be the answer here. So the big pharmaceutical companies, the interest groups that raise all of this money by whipping people into a frenzy around this issue, they are loyal to them. That's my answer. Chris, are you back with me?
Yeah, sorry, I had a technical difficulty there.
That's
Just
okay.
With respect to these Democrats, they're afraid of being called anti-LGBT. You can't have any common sense opinion about the transgender or queer theory, because if you do, then you're a bigot against the anti-LGBT, and that's the end of their political career. So it's just pure cowardice and fear driving this whole thing.
Yeah, so they're victims. Some of them are victims of this Chinese Cultural Revolution as well, and that's how it's expressing itself on this stage. Thank you very much. Billboard Chris, as always, on Twitter. You can find him there. He's doing the great work of spreading the good word that you are not a mistake. Thank you very much, Chris.
What you do not know is the experiences of the women on the University of Pennsylvania swim team. My teammates and I were forced to undress in the presence of Leah, a 6'4" tall biological male, fully intact with male genitalia, 18 times per week. Some girls opted to change in bathroom stalls, and others used the family bathroom to avoid this. When we tried to voice our concerns to the athletic department, we were told that Leah's swimming and being in our locker room was a non-negotiable, and we were offered psychological services to attempt to re-educate us to become comfortable with the idea of undressing in front of a male. To sum up the university's response, we, the women, were the problem, not the victims.
Paula Scanlon in some unbelievable and great testimony today before the House, just saying how out of control things got at the University of Pennsylvania in order to accommodate the cruelty of having a boy swim on the girls' swim team and then undress with them 18 times a week with all of his male parts still intact. Congressman Wesley Hunt, the Republican, reacting to all of this today.
And I can assure you that my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old daughters will not change in front of biological men. This is ridiculous. I don't care what party you are a part of. If you think that we are all equal and the same biologically, you've literally lost your mind. And when my 2 daughters work hard in the sport, work hard in their craft to be the best that they can be amongst other women, they will compete against other women. I owe Victoria and Olivia and every other young lady in this country that. If you think I'm wrong, I am not the problem. I can assure you.
You ever have an issue politically where you look at something and you say, am I on the right side of this? Do I have this right? This is one of those clear calls, isn't it? Yeah, I'm on that guy's side. There is no way I'm on the opposite side of this issue. Yeah, sure, men can be in the women's locker room. No thanks. That's insane. That's totally insane. As Congressman Hunt says, this is ridiculous. We're going to play this video years from now. It's going to be looking back at lobotomies and going, what the hell were we doing? One can only hope that things get better from here as people start waking up. Mike McCormick will join us coming up in the next hour. The stenographer for Vice President Joe Biden for years. He's seen it all, and he'll react to the late-breaking news, the developments over the last 24 hours involving the Biden crime family.